I'd like to welcome you to Calvary Chapel. We're in the middle of a study in the book of Genesis, and so I'm going to invite you to join us in Genesis chapter 30. The 25th verse is where we left off, and it's where we pick up. Guys, we're going to cover a lot of ground this morning. We're going to look at this account in Jacob's life, and I think it's kind of fits together as we're going to look at chapter 30, the rest of it, chapter 31 and chapter 32, and we're going to try to tie all this together. Now, I think the story has to go together for it to have the impact or the meaning that was intended by the writer. And so we're going to jump right in. Now, just kind of understand what's happening up until this point. We've been watching the life of Jacob, and Jacob is known as the conniver, the heel catcher. He was that from the very beginning of his life. Now this is what's interesting. His brother, the firstborn, was Esau, and Esau was hairy. That's what Esau means, hairy, right? So I think what's important in that note is that they would name their children by their features or by their character. So you got Esau, little gremlin, hairy guy, okay? And then you have Jacob, who was grabbing Esau's heel as he's coming out of the birth canal. I mean, he wanted to be first from the very beginning. And so he's grabbing his heel to get back in. I'm first, right? That's the idea here. And what Mom and Dad name him is Jacob, which is conniver, heel catcher, surplanter, right? They saw it from the beginning. It was like, me first. That was the attitude. He continues with that nature in that he rips off his brother's birthright. He rips off his brother's blessing. Right? So he's been living this, conniving kind of life for many years from the beginning. And he moves to Haran, where his uncle Laban is, and as soon as he gets to Haran, he makes a deal with Uncle Laban, and he soon finds out that this was a hereditary trait. Because Laban is just as much of a conniver, if not more so, than Jacob. And he makes a deal with him. He says, look, here's what I'll let you, he goes, I'll pay you. What do you want me to pay you? He goes, look, I'll work 7 years from you. You give me your daughter Rachel. I'm in love with Rachel. That's my woman. And as he serves his 7 years, Laban pulls a fast one on him and switches out the oldest daughter, Leah, droopy eyes, that was her name, at night says, hey, here's your wife, take her into the tent. And he sleeps with her and wakes up in the morning and figures out that it's not Rachel, but Leah. And so he just got duped. He goes back angry. I can't believe you would deceive me like this, Mr. Deceiver, right? You deceived me. And he goes, look, it's just our custom. We have to marry the oldest first and then the youngest. So I'll tell you what, you work another 7 years and I'll give you Rachel too. He only wanted one wife. He ends up with two. Guys, one wife is more than enough for any man. He gets two for the price of one. Actually, two for the price of two. Right? So now he's got two sisters. Imagine you got married to the sisters and now they have a rivalry going on. They hate each other. They're constantly in competition with one another. And Jacob is completed his 14 years of service. And his first thought in chapter 30, verse 25 is, it's time to leave now. Right? Watch. Here's where we pick up. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service, which I have done for you. Here's the deal. Jacob, after 14 years of service, he goes, look, I paid my dues. Just let me leave now. I want to go back to my country. Now remember, God had met with Jacob on that journey to Haran. And as he met with him, God made a promise. He said, look, I'm going to bring you back into the land. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to bless your descendants after you. They're going to be like the sand on the seashore, like the stars in the sky in multitude. And so God had made a promise. And it's as though now Jacob is remembering God's promises. He's going, it's time to go back. And Laban has something to say about that. Look at verse 27. And Laban said to him, please stay. If I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Check that out. Laban acknowledges, look, I've been blessed because of you, Jacob. I don't want you to go anywhere. So here's what we're going to do. Tell me how much you want me to pay you, and whatever you set, I'm going to let you have. Right? Watch this. Verse 28, and he said, name your wages, and I'll give it. And Jacob said, you know how I've served you and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I also provide for my own house? So he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. I like that. Because look, you're not giving it to me. I mean, someone that's a conniver, they're wanting to think that you're kind of somehow doing them a favor, right? Rather than he's actually working for his wages. He goes, look, let me tell you, what should I give you? No, you're not giving me anything, buddy. Uncle, buddy. This isn't you doing me a favor. It's me laboring for my wages. And I think it's interesting that Jacob wants him to understand that this isn't something you're doing. It's something that God's doing. And we'll see that in a second. Check this out. Watch as it continues. What shall I give you? Verse 31, he said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. And let me pass through your flocks today, removing there all the speckled and spotted sheep and all the brown ones among the lambs, the spotted and speckled among the goats, and these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come. When the subject of my wages comes before you, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the lambs will be considered stolen if it's with me. And Laban said, oh, that it was according to your word. Now here was the deal. He's going, look, all of the brown, the white, the black animals that are in the herds, as they're separated, look, those are yours. My wages will be all the spotted, all the streaked, all the ones that are abnormal. And in that culture, in that day, that would have been an abnormality for you to have the spotted or the speckled. So it was the lesser within the flock. And Laban hears the deal. He goes, man, let it be. Let's go for it. He couldn't shake hands fast enough, right? So here was the deal. If there's any of the animals that have a spot or a streak on it, that's my wages. If all the animals that are solid in color, those are yours. Check this out. Talk about a conniver. He goes, oh, that it were according to your word. Look at verse 35. So Laban removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, everyone that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the land of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now, when you read that, you understand something. What Laban did was he goes, oh yeah, that's a great deal, but we're starting from now. And he takes all the spotted and speckled flocks and he removes them, thinking that if there's no spotted and speckled lambs or rams or goats here, then all he's going to have is solid ones, and therefore he's going to have very little wages or no wages for all of this labor he's going to give me. And he puts a 3-day journey between them. Now, guys, a 3-day journey, do you realize what he's doing? Only a conniver would think of this. Laban, the conniver, right? He's going, this is what will happen. Jacob will come and mate his spotted, with the spotted ones, the solid ones. And he's going to, if they're real close, he'll just kind of sneak them over, mate with them, kind of bring them back. And then there'll be spotted ones all of a sudden. He goes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it a 3-day journey that I'm going to put all the spotted and the striped animals so that there's no possible way. Only a conniver would think like that. And he does it. Separates them all. Jacob's there, goes, all right, this is what I start with. And it's going to be evidence of God's favor and God's provisions. Look at verse 37. Jacob took for himself rods of green, poplar, and of almond and chestnut trees, peeled white stripes in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods, and the rods which he had peeled, he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive them when they came to drink. And so the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Now, this was an old wives' tale that Jacob's just kind of going, what am I going to do now? All I have is pure colored animals. He goes, I got an idea. I've heard this in the past. I'll take some limbs from the almond tree and I'll just strip the bark off it, expose the white, and then I'll do that, every so often. And what I'll do is I'll put that in the watering troughs, and they'll be looking at the striped, and they'll produce striped. Subliminal, I don't know. Right? I mean, he's grasping at straws here. Just like, here, this is what I'll do. I got to come up with something. And he does it, and the flocks begin to produce spotted, speckled, and striped offspring. Now, guys, it had nothing to do with Jacob's little conniving. We know Jacob acknowledges that. Look at chapter, and we'll get here, but I just want to as we're at this point, look at verse 7 of chapter 31. Your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not allow him to hurt me. Did you notice that, guys? Jacob acknowledged that God's the one who's protecting me. And God's the one who's going to provide for me. And God's the one who's going to give me the wages that's mine. You see, it's a God thing. This is God. And so he's over there still in his conniving. Now remember, Jacob's the conniver. Guys, this whole event that we're going to be looking at, it's all about Jacob wrestling. He's going to be wrestling with Laban. He's going to be wrestling with Esau. He's going to be wrestling with God. And all of it is about God dealing with Jacob's life. And Laban becomes an instrument in the hand of God to break Jacob down. This is the whole deal. Now watch this. Verse 40, Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked and all the brown in the flock of Laban. But he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. When the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in, so the feebler were Laban's and the stronger were Jacob's. Here's the key. Look at verse 43. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, had large flocks, female and male servants, camels and donkeys. Guys, God is prospering him big time. We're going to see here in a moment, he's going to send over 500 animals ahead of him to Esau just as a present. Now if you had 10 animals in that day, you were considered middle class, right? You were doing well. he sends 500 animals just as an appeasement to his brother ahead of him. That tells you that was just a portion of his flock. That tells you that Jacob's flocks were enormous. And he was wealthy. And it tells us right here that he was exceedingly prosperous. Large flocks, male servants, camels, and donkeys, right? That was he had an enormous amount of wealth at this time because God was blessing him. Now, chapter 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all his wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Now everyone's becoming bitter toward Jacob. Jacob's ripping off dad. Now the sons are upset because that's their inheritance. And they're going, man, Jacob's getting over on dad. And they start becoming really bitter toward Jacob at the family gatherings. And then all of a sudden Laban starts seeing him and starts giving him stink eyes. Just staring him down, right? And Jacob acknowledges, okay, this is becoming very uncomfortable. Family gatherings aren't fun anymore. Getting around with, God's, all of Rachel and Leah's brothers and sisters and dad, it's now becoming a drag rather than a blessing. And so notice what happens in verse 3. It says, and the Lord said to Jacob. Notice that God made it uncomfortable for Jacob, and then God speaks to Jacob. And this is the first time in 20 years, guys, in 20 years, that God speaks to Jacob. The last time that God spoke to Jacob is when he was coming into the land of Haran. And he fell asleep, and there was a ladder, a stairway, and that stairway was going up into heaven, and he saw the angels ascending and descending, and the Lord said, Jacob, I'm going to make you great, I'm going to bless you, I'll be with you, I'm going to go before you, right? That was the last time he had talked to him. For 20 years, we don't hear God speaking to Jacob once. And now it's time where he's making everything uncomfortable for him, and then God shows up, and he says, look, Jacob, return to the land of your fathers, to your family, and I will be with you. Guys, God now is intervening in the life of Jacob. Now, it's interesting, and you got to ask the question. Back in chapter 30, verse 25, Jacob was already thinking about going back home. 6 years pass, and he's being, connived by Laban continually. God's blessing him, and God shows up and he goes, look, Jacob, it's now. You got to get out of here. And so God is moving Jacob to this place where now he's being stirred. He hears the voice of God, but it wasn't only the voice of God that he hears here. He had been having dreams. We're going to see that here. So God had been speaking to him on multiple occasions. Watch this. It gets incredible. Look at verse 4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock. Here's what it is. Leah and Rachel, come to the flock rather than me going to the house, because I need to tell you something. And he didn't want anybody to overhear this conversation just in case someone was sneaking in or spying in, right? So he's going to have a conversation with them out in the middle of the field. And he said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it's not favorable toward me as before. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your father has deceived me, and he has changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said, thus the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said, thus the streak shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father, and he's given them to me. And it happened at that time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes, and I saw in a dream, behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, gray, and spotted. And the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes now and see, all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. Guys, here's come back here. Check this out. Here's what it is. God is saying, it's not your little trick that you tried to pull over there, Laban. It's not stripping the bark. That wasn't what did it. I was watching what Laban was doing. He was ripping you off. And every time he changed your wages, 10 times. He says, look, too many of those, offspring are coming out streaked. You can have just the spotted. And then they would come out spotted. Hey, you can have just the ones that are black and spotted. And they'd come out, black and spotted. And God, every time he tried to change the wages, God would prosper Jacob. And God, in a dream, tells him, look, let me tell you something. This was me, Jacob. This was me defending you. This was me being with you, just like I promised. In the middle of all of your conniving, I was the one who was protecting and sustaining. Now, I love the picture because God is reminding Jacob of his promises. Guys, how many times have we done the very same thing that Jacob's done? We forget the promises of God, and we start to connive in our own mind how we're going to accomplish what we think needs to be accomplished, rather than just saying, God, I'm going to put my confidence in you, my trust in you. And Jacob, he's not done here. Look at verse 13. God's still speaking. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. And Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there still any portion of inheritance for us in my father's house? Are we not considered strangers by our father? For he has sold us and has also completely consumed our money. Look, he treated his daughters like possessions. He said, look, I'll sell her to you for 7 years of labor. I'll sell her to you for another 7 years of labor. And that was supposed to be a dowry, which meant that Laban's responsibility was to save it for his daughters in case something happened. But Laban spent it on himself. And the daughters are going, look, we have nothing. We have nothing. Dad sold us down the river. Why do we want to stay here? We get it. He's a rascal. Our own dad. Now, this is a great verse right here. Watch what he says. Verse 16. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. Wow. Every husband wants to hear that from a godly wife. Wherever God's guiding you, go for it. I thank God for when God had put it in my heart to move to Belen, my wife was like, hey, that's where God's calling you. You go for it. And she, right there by my side. And it's Leah and Rachel are going, you know what? If that's what God's telling me to do, then I'm with you. And it's an incredible picture because here God is leading and guiding Jacob, and Jacob is now sharing with his wife what God's telling him to do, and the wives are going, all right, let's go for it. Let's see what God does. Look at verse 17. And Jacob rose, he set his sons and his wives and on camels. He carried away all his livestock and all of the possessions which he had gained in acquired livestock, which he had gained in Padam-aram, to go to his father Isaac to the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's, and Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. Now they're planning, they're loading up, they're packing, they got the U-Haul out, right? Ready to get out of town. Rachel decides, here's a good idea. I'll go get Dad's gods, and I'll put them with our stuff. And still no. Now, if anyone can steal your God, you got problems, right? That's a bigger issue than anything else. She's stealing his gods, his idols, and she steals them away. Now. Jacob has no clue about it. I read a couple of different commentators on this. Some of them believe that was the evidence of an inheritance. If you had the family idols, that proved that you were the heir to the wealth and the riches of Dad, and so that she was stealing for that reason. It don't appear that she was, involved with idolatry, but who knows? She's a conniver too. That's definitely Laban's daughter, right? Steal away Dad's gods. That's what we'll do. And then it says that Jacob stole away. I mean, he kind of packed everything up and didn't even tell Laban about it, and he runs off, right? Two characters that are quite similar. Rachel and Jacob are. And now they're packing their stuff. They fled, verse 21, with all that they had. He arose, he crossed the river, headed toward the mountains of Gilead. Now, he thinks he's clear. Verse 22. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. He took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey. And he overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night. And he said to him, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. And Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains. And Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountain of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me? Carried away my daughters like captives taken with a sword. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrels and harps, liar. Verse 28. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. You've done foolishly in doing. I mean, this guy's good. He's a manipulator, right? He wants you to feel sorry for him. You didn't even let me kiss my daughters. You didn't even like them. You didn't let me kiss my grandchildren. You were stealing all of their inheritance, right? I mean, this guy's a character. You didn't even let me kiss him. Look at verse 29. It is in my power to do you harm. And that's why that was his intent. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Guys, after his big old spiel, he wanted to put all the guilt trip on first. He goes, let me tell you my real issue here. You ripped off my gods. How embarrassing is that? When you got to go and tell somebody, hey, give my God back. I mean, that's pretty low, right? I got to go defend. Now, if your God can't defend himself, you're in trouble. You see, the whole picture was that God was to defend Jacob, and Laban's now defending his God. Isn't that ironic? It's kind of the other way. Someone gets to that point in their life where they're having to protect their gods. Boy. Look at verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let them live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have done, what I have of yours, and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. Now Jacob's thinking, here's this guy's such a conniver. He's trying to use the excuse of stealing his idols as a way to find out if I took anything from his house. So he goes, look, go through anything you want, man. Search whatever you want to search. And if anyone has your gods, let them be put to death. Jacob this whole time has no idea that Rachel is the one whose life's at stake here, right? So he gives them the option, go ahead and search everything. And it's interesting that verse 33, it says, Laban went into Jacob's tent. That's the first place he went. He went straight to Jacob's tent. He started tearing apart everything, throwing everything around, looking for his gods, thinking, I know it's here. And he looks through Laban's tent. Didn't find it. He went into Leah's tent. Now, Leah would have probably been the one that got the shortest end of the deal. She was the first wife, but she was never loved by Jacob. And so she was bitter toward Dad. You sold me to a guy who didn't even love me, didn't even care about me, didn't even want me in the first place. And so she's bitter. You're going, you know what, if Jacob didn't do it, then Leah had to do it. So he goes into Leah's tent, doesn't find it in Leah's tent, and then, check it out, then he went into the two maids' tents, and he did not find them, and then he went out of Leah's tent, and he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols. She had put them in camel saddles and sat on them, and Laban searched all about the tent and did not find them. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of woman is with me. And he searched, but he did not find the household idols. Now you think of, these idols could have said, hey, I'm over here. No. They couldn't speak, right? But here's what's crazy. Rachel is just as much of a conniver. It's incredible. She's sitting down, right? She's got her little robe on, kind of spread out, and she goes, I'm sorry, Master, sorry, Lord, sorry, Dad. I can't get up. I'm on my monthly cycle right now. I mean, what dad's going to, okay, I'm out of here. I know better than mess with that, right? He just kind of gets out of, leaves her alone, and she gets away with stealing his idols. Now, that kind of got Jacob in a little bit of a frenzy. Look, watch what happens. Look at verse 86. And Jacob was angry. He rebuked Laban, and he answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you've searched all my things, which part of your household things have you found? Set it before me, my brethren, your brethren, that we may judge between us both. These 20 years, he's going to give it to him now. Look, for 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young. I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beast I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I've served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks. And you have changed my wages 10 times. And unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the God and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Oh, I bet that felt good. Let me tell you, man, right? He just railed on him. Man, I've served you. I've been faithful to you. I've never stolen from you. And here you are. And unless God had spoken to you, you would have came out and you would have killed me. And to think that I would have went and told you beforehand, you would have sent me out with a stick in my hand, back home with nothing. Don't even try to play this pious role. I mean, he just lays it on him, right? Check this out. Look at verse 43. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom you have borne? Now therefore come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone, he set up as a pillar, and Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jagar Shadadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness. Now both those mean a witness. He goes, this is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name shall be called Gilead. Also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me, and when we are absent from one another, if you afflict my daughters, or if you take our other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Now, it's just interesting that Laban, and he goes, look, everything's mine. It's all mine. You ripped me off. He wouldn't give in. And he finally goes, but what can I do? God just told me I can't touch you. God just showed up in a dream and said, I can't kill you. So I can't even persuade you to come back with me, right? Think about Laban's position here. Don't speak good and don't speak evil. Just leave him alone. And Laban's there with his hands cuffed because God said, you mess with me, buddy. Your little gods aren't going to help you. I guarantee you that. They're sitting under Rachel right now, by the way. Right? Your gods ain't going to help you. And so he goes, what can I do? You guys just taking everything. He goes, look, let's just do this. We'll make a covenant. We'll make a deal right here. And they gather a bunch of stones up, and they say, this is going to be a witness. This is going to be called Mizpah. Mizpah. It's an interesting word. It means to watch, right? And here's the deal. You might have gone into a Christian bookstore, and they got Mizpah rings, or a Mizpah bracelet, or a Mizpah necklace, right? And the whole idea is that, God watched between us while we're apart. Two lovebirds that are going to be apart, they give Mizpah rings to each other. Guys, this wasn't a good thing. Someone gave you a Mizpah ring. They probably had the right intent. But what he's saying is that you're such a dirty scoundrel that God's watching you. And whenever you try to rip off my daughters, or you try to mess up my grandkids, or you try to, take another wife, may God watch you and may God break your toes. That's the picture between this relationship. It wasn't like, we're going to be apart for all of these years, and one day we'll be joined back together. That's not it. That's not the promise here. He's going, God's watching you, you little scoundrel. And God's a witness. May God deal with you if you do any of these things. You ever afflict my daughters. You ever take other wives. You ever, do anything conniving. May God watch you. And then Laban said, here is the heap, verse 51, and here's the pillar which I have placed between you and me. The heap is a witness. This pillar is a witness that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered sacrifice on the mountain, called his brethren to eat bread, and they ate bread. They stayed that night on the mountain, and early in the morning Laban arose, kissed his sons. That's what he wanted the whole time, right? Kissed his sons and his daughters. He blessed them, and Laban departed and returned to his place. Now, behind him is Laban, okay? As we go into chapter 32, all of a sudden, Jacob remembers Esau hates me. Now think about this. You just made a promise. I'm not going back there, man. And now he's aware that Esau, the brother that he had ripped off 20 years ago, is still where he's going. Do you think God's trying to get him in a place? Do you think God's trying to go, look, you can't go back that way, buddy, and up there, you don't even want to know what's waiting for you. You better get on your face and seek after me. Guys, I don't believe any of this is coincidence. I believe God is getting Jacob right where he wants him. He's hemming him in. He's put him in a rock, between a rock and a hard place. And let me tell you, in your life and in my life, God will often do that so that we have to turn to Him. He'll get you to the place where there's no other options but Him. So that you realize that all of your conniving and all of your planning and all of your self-dependence will never bring peace in your life. The only one that can bring peace in your life is God. And it's incredible because the very next thing, chapter 32, and we're moving. We got this. Look at chapter 32. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And Jacob saw them and said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, which means double camp. There was his camp, and there was God's camp with all of the angels. And this is the second time that Jacob sees angels. The first time they were going up and down. This time they're camped around in a camp right next to his camp. And I'm convinced and I believe that what's happening here is God is wanting Jacob to surrender his will over to God's will. But Jacob hasn't got his name changed yet. He's still Jacob. And Jacob isn't done being the conniver just yet. Look at verse 3. And we're going somewhere with this, guys. I want you to stick with me. Watch this. Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkey, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight." And the messenger returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you." Watch this. "And 400 men are with him." Uh-oh. Now, when you have 400 men, that's not for a camping trip. Jacob knows, in his mind, Esau is mad. And he's coming to kill me. He's not coming by himself. He's not coming with 10 guys. He's got 400 men with him. Guys, that was an army in that day. They lived in villages. It wasn't big cities. In a village, you had 400 warriors. You had 400 fighters. Man, you had power. And Esau, we know Esau was a hunter from our previous chapters. And Esau's coming with 400 men. And do you think Jacob's shaken by now? You better believe he is. He can't go back to Laban. He's just made a covenant. You don't come here, I won't go there. And he knows the only way to go is forward. And check this out, man. This is incredible. Verse 7. "So Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and divided the people that were with him and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 companies. And he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape." Is he still conniving? Think about it. Think about what he's doing. I'll send half the guys ahead of me. Me and the family will stay behind. And if they attack them, at least we got time to run. That's what he's thinking. We have an opportunity to escape. I'll see all the dust kind of from the war that's taking place. And we'll just head to the mountains, man. We'll get out of here. But watch this. Then, I don't think that, circle that. Then Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and the God of my father Isaac, the Lord has said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will be with you." Guys, this is the first time that we see Jacob pray. The first time. He's 90-some years old. I think sometimes we got in our mind that maybe he's 20, 30, 40 years old. No, he's 90-year-old man at this point. And it's the first time that he's actually crying out to God. God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country, to your family, and I will deal with you. I am not worthy of the least of all your mercies, of all the truth which you have shown your servant, for I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. Now he's being honest. I fear him. God, I'm afraid. It's the first time Jacob's even acknowledged that. I fear him. Check it out. Lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said you will surely treat you well, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he lodged there that same night. He took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. And he delivered them to the hand of the servant. Every drove by itself said to his servant, "Pass before me," and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you, ask you, saying, 'To whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you?' Then you shall say, 'They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent by my lord Esau to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us.' So he commanded the second and the third and all who followed the drove, saying, 'In this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And also say, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the presence that goes before me. And afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me.' So the present went out over before him, and he himself lodged that night in the camp." Guys, this is the deal. He's conniving again. He prays, connives. He says, "God's, delivered me from you, Laban," connives. And he's just vacillating between being Jacob and someone who trusts in God. Conniving, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable. You read this going, wait a minute. He goes, "Look, I got another plan. We'll break them into two companies. No, I got another plan. We'll send out a bunch of presents way in front of me. And he's got to forgive me." Guys, do you know what he forgot about? The camp of angels that were with him. He totally dismissed that whole camp of angels. Did you realize how powerful one angel is? The Bible says this, that when Elisha was in a camp, there was 180,000 Assyrians that came out to fight against Elijah, and it says that one angel killed 180,000 Assyrians in one night. Now, it says there was a whole camp of angels hanging out with him. Did he have any reason to be afraid? Not at all. There was only 400 dudes there. I mean, a half an angel could have took care of those guys. He's got a whole camp sitting next to him. But he's got his eyes upon self rather than on God. And then, guys, here's where it all ties together. Look at verse 22. Chapter 32, "And Jacob arose that night, took his wives, his two female servants, his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, he sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had." Here's a big river here. He sends his whole family to the other side of the river thinking, you know what? If Jacob shows up, at least they'll be spared. He'll kill me. And once I'm gone, he's not going to worry about anybody else. Then, there's that then again. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Then, I imagine that man, and we're going to find out this is the Lord. This is a Christophany. This is an appearance of God and Jesus in the Old Testament. But can you imagine that man grabs Jacob for the first time, and the first thing Jacob does is grab his hand to see if it's hairy? Here's Esau. He got me. And he realized that this isn't Esau at all. And it says that he wrestled with him that night until the next morning. All night long, wrestling. I know some of you guys in here are wrestlers. I know some of you guys. Wrestling. What does it take to wrestle just for 10 minutes? How much does that take out of you, just wrestling? Wrestling, it's not long. It don't take more than 3-4 minutes where you're sucking for wind. Because you're using every muscle in your body to try to get the upper hand. And that's why wrestlers, some of the most fit athletes in the world, wrestlers, man, because they got to be able to endure They got to, but to think, and that's just for 3-minute rounds, 9 minutes. Jacob's been wrestling all night. I can just kind of picture it. I kind of picture Jacob, long beard, kind of long hair, just everything's everywhere. Sweating, dripping. He's been wrestling all night with God. And it tells us in the 23rd verse, it says this. 25th verse, I'm sorry. Did I skip a hole? There it is, 25th verse. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Here's the deal. All night long, and God says, this guy's not giving. Now, it wasn't like Jacob had Jesus pinned down or something, right? Don't think that. Like, say uncle, got him an arm bar. That's not what's going on here at all. I kind of picture it like this. Kind of like, I remember whenever I was going to go on a long trip to South America, Japan, somewhere to go do a mission trip or something, and my kids, when my little girls were small, they would both come in, they would grab in my leg and say, Daddy, don't go, and they would just hold on. I'd say, babe, let go. Daddy's got to go. I'm going to miss the plane. Let go. That's what I see happening here. Jacob's just holding on. It kind of changed it from wrestling to boxing. You ever seen a boxing match where someone is just so beat up, both their eyes are closed and they're still trying to fight? That's Jacob. He's just holding on for dear life. But I'm not going to let go. I'm not going anywhere. And all night long, and finally the Lord says, you know what? And he touches his socket, and he puts his hip out of joint. Have you ever had a shoulder out of joint or a hip out of joint? Oh, that's excruciating pain. Excruciating pain. And all of a sudden, Jacob's there with, a hip that's out of joint. He's but he says that he continued to wrestle. He wrestled with him. He's still holding on. And then he said to him, let me go, for the day breaks. This is the Lord speaking. He said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And God said to him, what's your name? What's your name? And he says, Jacob. You see, guys, name had everything to do with your character. And God says to Jacob, Jacob, what are you? What are you, man? I'm a conniver. I'm a heel catcher. I'll trip anybody to get in front. That's my nature. That's my character. And God will always bring us to this place that until you acknowledge your fault, your failure, your character flaw, that he can't change you. He couldn't make him Israel until he acknowledged that he was Jacob. And God can never change us until we come to him and say, God, this is what I am. This is what I am. I don't want to be that anymore. I want to be different. I want you to rule me now. I'm tired of the conniving. It's not gotten me anywhere. I got enemy from Esau. I got enemy from Laban. I've lied to Dad. I've ripped off everybody. I'm just a conniver. You see, God brings us to this place in our lives until you acknowledge, you know what, I got an issue here. God help me. But until you acknowledge that, man, you'll continue to be that. And that's why God is looking for us to confess our sins to him, and he's faithful and just to forgive us for all unrighteousness. But you have to confess it first. And he had to come to God. He had to stand there before God and say, I'm Jacob. I'm Jacob. Watch this. And he said, your name shall no longer be conniver, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. You're no longer the conniver. you're now governed by God. Israel, that's his character now. That's going to be his new nature. He's still going to fall back. We're going to see him backslide. It's not going to take long for him to backslide again. But here's the crazy thing, is that something transpired in this moment, guys. Is that now God is now acknowledging him as a man governed by God. I tell you, man, that's the greatest prize you could ever win. Is the day you acknowledge that your life isn't your own. And if that means wrestling with God all night long, then so be it. If that means that God's got to come in and dislocate your hip, then so be it. It doesn't matter what it takes. It's that you finally win the prize when you acknowledge that, God, I want you to rule over my life. I want you to be my king. I want you to be my Lord. I don't want to make decisions unless they're based on you and your truth and your wisdom and your guidance for my life. I give. And Jacob that night, man, was changed. The Jacob that night was transformed. It says that Jacob at that point asked, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. Now, God never tells Jacob his name. Later on, Moses is going to ask, "What's your name?" He goes, "I am Yahweh," right? I am. I am that I am. Who do I say sent me? I am that I am. Now, God doesn't tell Jacob what his name is. God just kind of like, why are you asking my name? Don't worry about that. It's not your business, buddy. I'll tell Moses later. This isn't yours. Right? He never answers him. He just says, "Tell me your name." Goes that he blessed him, and Jacob called the name of that place Peniel. "For I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." And just as he crossed over Peniel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Guys, this is the deal. For the rest of his life, he would walk with a limp. He's going to meet Esau. Chapter 33, we'll get there. He's going to meet Esau. But now, he's wounded. He's a wounded man. And so what is he going to have to do? He's going to have to learn to trust the Lord. You see, in our brokenness, in our weakness, is when we finally say, "God, I got to trust in you." And God will do whatever's necessary to get us there, guys. It's interesting. We're gonna come to the life of Joseph, and Joseph's a whole different character. Joseph just, "Yes, Lord," dream. "Hey, God told me this. This is what's going to happen." Joseph just an incredible man of faith. But Joseph was a different character than Jacob. I wish I was more like Joseph than Jacob, to be honest with you. Life would be so much easier. You don't have to wrestle so hard. For those of us that are Jacobs, and probably a little bit of Jacob in all of us, right? God just waiting for you to just say, "God, I surrender." That's what he's looking for. For you to just say, "I don't want to be that anymore." There's a very interesting verse, and here's where we're going to close, and we're going to wrap this up in Hosea chapter 12, verse 3. Hosea chapter 12. This would have been way down the road. Hosea chapter 12. He's looking back. Check this out. "He took his brother by the heel in the womb, and in his strength he struggled with God." Notice that. In his strength. He was still a self-made man. It was still his power. "He struggled with the angel and prevailed." Check this out. "He wept and sought favor from him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spoke to us." Do you see the demeanor of Jacob at this point? He's found him strong, and then he's weeping. He's weeping. This wasn't Jacob overpowering the Lord. This is Jacob going, "Please, please, bless me. Please, bless me." He sought favor. But here's the application, verse 5. "And the Lord God of hosts," the Lord is his memorial name, "so you, by the help of your God, return." Interesting. Hosea is talking to the children of Israel who thought they were strong in their own might. And he's going, look, guys, until you're broken, you're never going to get back to where God has you. And that's so true for the nation of Israel, and it's true for you and me. That until we are broken and just realize, man, you know what, I am dependent upon the Lord. You know, some of you young guys think you're strong and you're mighty, and you know what, it just takes one day for God to break you. One day. And you give it enough time, you start to realize, man, I'm watching my dad, and he's watching him becoming more and more frail, and you just realize that, you know what, my dad was my hero. He was strong. He was the provider. He was the protector. My dad was crazy. And I see him now, and he's becoming more and more feeble, and you realize, you know what, one day, man, one day we're all heading there. Where are you going to put your trust? You going to wait till then? Or you got a lot of conniving to go still then. You can do that now and just say, God, I'm done. I'm done. Rule over my life. Take over.